Kang Jae-Min had dismantled 4 companies, restructured 2 governments' worth of debt, and survived 1 assassination attempt all before his 34th birthday. The one thing he had never survived, and never expected to, was a 23-year-old intern from Brooklyn with a tote bag and an open cup of coffee. The morning it happened, he was already in a bad mood which, for Jae-Min, looked identical to every other mood he had, because the man had exactly one public expression and it was controlled indifference. But Minute Ho, his assistant of 4 years, could read it in the set of his shoulders. That morning they said, "Do not approach me unless the building is on fire." The board had voted against his acquisition strategy the night before. Not because it was wrong, it wasn't, and they'd all know it in 6 months, but because 3 members were still loyal to the rival faction trying to claw back control of his company. He had sat in that boardroom and watched them raise their hands against him and done nothing, because patience was the sharpest weapon he owned. But his shoulders were angry about it. He crossed the lobby at exactly 7:43 a.m. He didn't acknowledge the marble floors or the 40-floor glass walls or any of the people moving around him. He acknowledged nothing that wasn't useful. He did not see her until the coffee was already in the air. Zara Mitchell had calculated her commute 4 times the night before, ironed her blazer twice, rehearsed her introduction in the mirror at 6 in the morning while her roommate banged on the door and asked if she was having a breakdown. She was not having a breakdown. She was nervous, not because she doubted herself, but because she understood exactly what this meant. Her father had worked double shifts for 3 years to help her through Columbia. Her younger sister had cried when she got the offer letter. She wasn't carrying just her own dream through those glass doors. She was carrying people. She was also 7 minutes late, because of a dead subway car under the East River, and she had spent those 7 minutes standing perfectly still in the dark with her blazer pressed and her tote bag organized, telling herself it would be fine. It was not fine. She came through the lobby doors at a controlled run, the kind of run that is technically a very fast walk so that no one can officially call it running, with her phone in one hand and her coffee in the other. Her tote bag caught on someone's arm. The coffee lurched. Her fingers slipped. And then she watched, in the particular slow motion that the brain reserves for catastrophic moments, as the full cup dark roast, no sugar, scalding, left her hand and arced through the lobby air in a graceful, terrible curve before it landed directly against the chest of the man standing at the elevator doors. The lobby went silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind that happens when everyone around you stops breathing at exactly the same time. Zara looked up. The man standing in front of her was tall and cold-eyed, and dressed in a white suit that now had a spreading dark stain blooming across the lapel like something alive. He hadn't flinched. Hadn't stepped back. He stood perfectly still, looking down at his ruined jacket with the expression of someone who had already decided what came next and was simply waiting for the appropriate moment to execute it. His face was sharp, almost carved, dark eyes that didn't blink often enough. Kang Jae-Min, 34 years old. CEO of Kang Enterprises. She didn't know that yet. She just knew, this man is the kind of dangerous that doesn't raise his voice. 2 security guards materialized out of nowhere. She should have apologized. Every rational instinct she had screamed shrink, go small, go soft, disappear into the marble floor and hope the building swallows you whole. But Zara Mitchell had taken the subway every day for 4 years through a city that would absolutely eat you alive if you learned to make yourself small, and somewhere along the way she had made a decision about that, and the decision was, no. She looked him dead in the eye. "It's a suit," she said. "Not a life." The security guards froze. Someone behind her actually gasped. For 3 full seconds, Kang Jae-Min did not move. He looked at her, not the way people looked when they were angry, not the way they looked when they were deciding on a punishment, but the way a person looks when something has genuinely surprised them and they are trying to understand why. Like a mathematician encountering a number that shouldn't exist. Like a man who had a very complete map of the world and had just found a road on it he didn't recognize. Then he did something she didn't expect. He looked down at the stain on his jacket. Then back at her. And the corner of his mouth moved. Not a smile, it never quite got there. But the ghost of one. There and gone in under a second, so fast she almost convinced herself she'd imagined it. She didn't imagine it. She knew she hadn't, and she didn't know what to do with that, Because men like this one, men with this kind of stillness, this kind of weight, did not almost smile at the person who had just humiliated them in a lobby full of witnesses. They didn't do that. There was no version of that in any script she had ever prepared for. And Zara Mitchell had prepared a lot of scripts. He stepped into the elevator. The doors closed. The lobby exhaled all at once, and Zara stood there, heart slamming against her ribs, completely alone in the middle of 50 people, not just wondering if she'd ended her career, but thinking about a half-second expression on a man's face that had no business existing, turning it over, trying to make it fit a map of her own. It didn't fit. Upstairs, alone in his office while Minute Ho fetched a fresh shirt, Jae-Min sat very still at his desk. He had one tell. A single habit that anyone who knew him well could identify. When something occupied his mind against his will, he picked up whatever pen was nearest and turned it between his fingers. Slowly. Methodically. His therapist, seen exactly 3 times before he decided he didn't have time for it, had called it a grounding technique. Jae-Min called it thinking. He was turning the pen. It's a suit. Not a life. He had stood in that lobby while the coffee soaked through his jacket, and he had already composed the sequence in his head. Security would step forward, she would apologize, he would say nothing, she would be removed. Standard. Clean. Final. She had not apologized. She had looked at him at him Kang Jae-Min, a man that sitting senators were careful around, and told him to put it in perspective. He set the pen down. Picked up his phone. Minute Ho. The intern who spilled the coffee. Pull her file. Her name was Zara Mitchell. Columbia graduate. Top of her economics cohort. Letters of recommendation. His talent acquisition team had apparently debated for 6 hours. A background that said, this person works harder than you, has been working harder than you her entire life, and has never once been given the benefit of the doubt that you have had since birth. He read the file twice. Move her assignment, he said, when Minute Ho returned. She works directly under me. Minute Ho stood in the doorway holding a fresh shirt and stared at him. Sir, she's a first-year intern. The standard rotation. I know what the standard rotation is. I designed it. May I ask what changed? Jae-Min took the shirt. She didn't apologize. She spilled coffee on your. I know what she did, Minute Ho. I was there. He was already moving toward the private bathroom. She looked at me and didn't apologize, and I want to know if that was stupidity or something else. If it's stupidity, she'll be gone within a week. If it's something else, he paused at the door. Put her across from me. Directly. Minute Ho wrote it down and did not argue again. Zara received the reassignment notice at 2 p.m. She read it 3 times. Then she called her mother. He put me directly under him, she said. The CEO. The man I spilled coffee on. A pause on the line. Is that good or bad? I genuinely cannot tell. Her mother, who had raised 2 daughters on a nurse's salary and possessed the kind of practical wisdom no graduate school ever managed to teach, said, then go find out. And Zara? Yeah. Don't you dare apologize for the coffee. She walked into Jae-Min's office at 3 p.m. with her notepad and her composure locked so tightly in place she could feel it in her jaw. He did not look up. He slid a thick folder across the desk toward the chair across from him. Sit. She sat. Full restructuring analysis. Market comparison, financial projections, risk assessment. 7 tomorrow morning. She opened the first page. Read for 10 seconds. Closed it. The risk assessment should drive the projections, she said. Not the other way around. The real variable is the counterparty exposure on the Seijin Holdings side. I recognize the fund structure from a case study I wrote at Columbia on the 2019 cross-border collapse. Same configuration, different names. The market comparison is downstream of that, not the other way around. He looked up. It was the first time he had looked at her directly since the lobby. She felt the same thing she'd felt downstairs of being read at a speed she couldn't track, by someone who was very rarely surprised and was deciding right now whether she qualified. You got that from the cover page, he said. I got it from the fund structure listed on the cover page. Am I wrong? A pause. No. Then I'll lead with counterparty exposure. She stood. I'll have it to you by 6. She left before he could respond. Behind her, alone in his office, Jae-Min sat with the quiet of a room where something unexpected has just happened. He thought about the lobby. He thought about the file. He thought about a woman who had walked out of his office without waiting to be dismissed, twice now in a single day, and had been right both times. He picked up the pen, turned it once, set it down and got back to work. But the quiet stayed with him longer than it should have, and he noticed that too, and filed it somewhere he told himself he wouldn't return to. He returned to it 3 times before the end of the day. She had it to him at 5:52 a.m. Complete, color-coded, with a 2-page executive summary and a handwritten note clipped to the front, counterparty exposure worse than the cover page suggested. See Appendix C. You may want to revisit the Sejin timeline. He read the note first. Then Appendix C. Then the entire analysis from the beginning, which took 40 minutes, and when he finished he sat with it in the early quiet of the office before anyone else arrived. He had given that assignment to 3 people before her. All 3 had delivered something. None of them had found Appendix C. He got back to work. For 3 weeks she was exceptional, and he told her nothing about it, because praise created complacency and complacency was a luxury he didn't afford anyone, including himself. But he watched. He noticed. He made note of how she moved through a problem always from the outside in, always looking for the thing underneath the obvious thing. He also noticed, in week 2, that the senior analyst on the 4th floor had submitted a board presentation using a market segmentation model he recognized. He had seen it before in Zara's second deliverable, which she had developed independently and which Han had apparently photographed off her desk. Jae-Min had Han's office relocated to the Singapore branch within 48 hours. He told himself it was because theft within the organization was a structural problem. He told himself that for several days before he stopped bothering. The scene that almost ended it happened on a Thursday, week 3, at 8 p.m. He walked past her desk on his way out, not his usual route to the elevator, and stopped. The Daegu presentation. You're leading with the financial summary. You need to open with the risk. That's what the room came to understand. She had been awake for 19 hours. She had revised this document twice on feedback that had not included this note. She set down her pen. That would have been helpful to know before the second revision, she said. Yes. So why didn't you say it then? He considered this without rushing, without filling the silence. I wanted to see if you'd catch it yourself. She looked at him. And she felt something she hadn't expected in that moment, not just frustration, but the specific, complicated irritation of someone who can see that the person frustrating them is also, genuinely, trying to offer them something real. It would have been easier if he were simply wrong. He wasn't simply wrong. That was the most aggravating part. That's not a mentorship, she said. That's a test with no rubric, and the only thing it develops is the suspicion that I'm being set up to fail. She held his gaze. If you want me to get better, tell me what you see. I can take hard feedback. What I can't take is being managed like I might break. The floor was quiet around them. Jae-Min looked at her for a long moment. Something moved through his expression, not the ghost of a smile this time. Something older and more serious, the look of a man recognizing something he hadn't expected to find here. Lead with risk, he said. Always. In this building and everywhere else. When you walk into a room, tell people what they stand to lose before you tell them what they stand to gain. People move away from pain faster than they move toward reward. That's not a note about your presentation. That's the only real thing I know about how power works. He walked to the elevator. She stared at the space where he'd been, and she sat with the tangle of it, the frustration still live in her chest, and underneath it something she didn't have a clean name for, the feeling of being handed something true by someone who hadn't needed to explain it and had anyway. She thought about Kezia, home by 7 at a firm that never asked this much of her. She thought about how uncomplicated that sounded. She thought about Appendix C, and a man turning a pen between his fingers in an office she hadn't been allowed to see, deciding something about her.
She moved the risk section to page 1. She filed the tangle away somewhere she could find it later, because something told her she would need it. She found the room on a Friday afternoon, the east corridor, the wrong door, the whiteboard with the red lines connecting names that had no business being connected in a legitimate company. Curiosity is dangerous here. She turned. He was in the doorway, still, controlled, but something underneath was coiled tight in a way she hadn't seen before. I followed a misfiled folder. I wasn't looking for this. I know. He stepped in and closed the door. What did you see? She considered lying. She did neither. Shell companies, transfer records. Names from 3 cases I studied at Columbia that were never fully prosecuted. She held his gaze. A structure that makes sense as organized capital movement and doesn't make sense as anything a legitimate company needs to build. He said nothing. I'm going back to my desk, she said, and I won't tell anyone what I saw, but I need you to know I'm not blind, and I won't pretend to be. Whatever this is, I deserve to know who I'm actually working for. A long silence. Not today, he said, but I will tell you all of it. His voice was quiet and even. I need you to trust that for now. That's a significant thing to ask. Yes. Why should I? Because I haven't lied to you once. I've withheld things. I've tested you in ways I shouldn't have. But I have not lied to you, and I don't intend to start. She walked past him through the doorway. That night she sat on her fire escape in the October cold and seriously considered resigning in the morning. She called Kezia and said, without details, how do you know when something is worth the risk? And Kezia said, you already know, you're just scared of the answer. She didn't resign, but she stopped pretending any of this was simple. The listening device behind her shelf changed everything. He was at her apartment in 11 minutes. He walked every room without being asked. He found the device in 4 minutes, held it up, said nothing. This is your world, she said, and I'm in it now because of you? Yes. Then sit down and tell me everything, not a warning, not a partial answer, all of it tonight. He sat at her kitchen table, and for the first time in 12 years, he looked like a man who was tired of carrying something. He told her everything. The empire his grandfather built. The betrayal at 22, his closest friend handing the company's holdings to their rivals for a seat at a table Jae-Min hadn't been invited to. The years rebuilding in spaces a fully legitimate company couldn't reach, becoming methodically the kind of man survival required. The version of himself he'd buried, the rival faction, the 2 people they'd killed before he was 30, the 3 board members, Detective Park. When he finished, the apartment was quiet. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because you asked. He looked at his hands on her table. And in 12 years I have not told the truth to a single person who didn't already know it. Only people who could be held as liable as I was. You have nothing to lose by going straight to Park with everything you just heard. Then why tell me? Because I don't want to keep lying to you, even by omission. A pause. I'm aware this is not rational. I don't have a rational explanation for it. She was quiet for a long moment. I'm not going to Park, she said finally. Not to protect you, because you've been building towards something different and I want to see if that's real. She met his eyes. But from here, you tell me everything, every time, even when it's complicated. Yes, he said. She believed him. They moved her to a secured location. He posted 2 of his most trusted men outside. It wasn't enough. 3 days later, when she stepped outside for 5 minutes of air, they took her. Clean, fast, 40 seconds. He found her in a waterfront warehouse 4 hours later, and the 4 hours between the phone call and that door were the kind of time that changes a person's accounting of what they actually value. She was unharmed, zip-tied to a chair, jaw set, doing the same impression of calm over afraid she had performed in his lobby on day 1. When she saw him come through the door, something in her face gave way, not collapse, just the relief of someone who has been holding herself together through sheer will and finally has somewhere safe to put it down. He crossed to her and cut the zip tie and checked her face, her wrists, her eyes. I'm okay, she said. I'm not hurt. I see that. He stayed crouched in front of her, close enough that she could see the controlled fury behind his eyes, not at her, at himself, at the miscalculation. I should have had more coverage on the block. You came. Yes. I kept telling myself you would. I wasn't sure if that was rational or just something I needed to believe. It was rational, he said. He stood. His voice hardened as he looked past her at the men on the floor. No one takes what is mine. Then quieter, almost to himself, barely loud enough to reach her, no one touches her. She kept that second sentence. Not the first. What is mine had made her bristle even through the adrenaline, and she would tell him that later, clearly, and he would hear it and understand. She already knew somehow that he would. but no one touches her had not sounded like ownership. It had sounded like fear. The fear of a man who had spent 12 years building walls around everything that mattered to him and had just discovered, in a waterfront warehouse, that something mattered that he hadn't finished building walls around yet. She kept it. She held it somewhere quiet. In the car afterward, salt air off the water, both of them too worn down to perform anything. "You could have sent someone," she said. "Yes. Why didn't you?" He looked out the window. "Because in 4 hours of logistics, every resource, every debt I called, and the clearest single thought underneath all of it was, I need to be the one who walks through that door." A pause. "I didn't examine it, I just followed it. That's not something a person does for someone they don't care about." He was quiet. "Do you," she asked, "care about me?" The silence stretched the way silences do when the answer is yes, but the word has been locked away so long the key takes time to find. "Yes," he said. "Was that hard to say?" He looked at her sideways. "You have no idea." She held his gaze and let the quiet be what it was. Some things don't need filling in. This was one of them. 3 days later, clear-headed, she stood in his office and asked the real question. "Do you want something different? Not for me, for yourself." Genuinely. He went to the window. 40 floors of city below him, a city he had controlled a significant piece of for a decade. At a cost he had stopped letting himself calculate because the number was too high. "I built this life on a specific belief," he said. "That control was the same thing as safety, that if I had enough power, nothing could be taken from me again." A pause. "I have not felt safe once in 12 years, not once, and I have more power now than I ever imagined possible, so clearly the math was wrong somewhere. What do you want instead?" He turned from the window. He looked at her the way he had looked at her in the lobby on day one, like something that didn't fit the map, like a road he hadn't been able to stop thinking about. "I want to sleep," he said. "I want to eat dinner at a normal time. I want to stop being afraid of what it costs to care about someone." A pause. "I've been afraid of that for 12 years. I'm tired of it." "That's the one that matters," she said. "I know. Then that's where we start." He dismantled it slowly, and then all at once, the way change actually happens when a person means it. Shell companies dissolved. The rival faction structure handed to Detective Park through a negotiated channel that cost Jae-Min considerably and cost them everything collapsed in weeks. The 3 board members resigned. It was not a clean story. Transformation never is. There were things he couldn't make right, and he faced them anyway. There were nights he sat at his kitchen table alone and held the weight of what it had cost to become who he'd been, and he didn't look away from it. He had someone to come back to. That was new. That made it possible. 6 months later, 7:30, empty floor, she was at her desk when he appeared in the doorway. She didn't look up. "Go home, it's late." "I'm aware." Then she looked up. He was holding 2 cups of coffee, paper cups from the lobby cart. He set one on the edge of her desk. "Dark roast," he said. "No sugar." She stared at it. Then she looked at him. 12 months of everything rose up in her chest all at once: the lobby, the folder, the warehouse, the kitchen table at midnight, all of it, and she felt it move through her like something being set down. "That's not funny," she said. "It's a little funny." "It is genuinely not funny at all." The corner of his mouth moved, and this time it kept going, all the way into a real smile. Small, but real. The first real smile she had ever seen from him, and she had been watching for it since the morning she'd stood in that lobby with coffee on her hands and wondered what the ghost of an expression on a dangerous man's face had meant. Now she knew. "I owe you one suit," he said. "I considered this a reasonable starting point." She picked up the cup, looked at him over the rim. "You're going to need to do significantly better than lobby coffee." "I know," he said. "I intend to." He stayed. They sat on opposite sides of her desk in the quiet of the emptied floor, and they talked not about the business. Not about what was left to untangle. Not about any of the things that had built this moment, just talked. The way 2 people do when they've finally stopped pretending they don't want to be exactly where they are. Outside, the city moved in the dark, indifferent and enormous and constant. Inside, something that had been locked for 12 years was learning, slowly and for real, how to breathe. If this story did something to you, if you made it all the way here, you already know why we do this. Hit like if Jae-Min and Zara got to you. Subscribe for new stories every week. And drop a comment. What was the moment that broke you open? We read every single one. See you next time.